Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the bi-weekly Manchester United podcast. Now, I'm with myself, obviously, your host, Phil Brown, and my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing pretty well today, and you?
I'm doing okay. It's nice to see you survive the guy with the scythe right behind you. I
Yeah,
think I've got. I'm taking bets here that he's coming back. How that serial killer sort of stalks their prey first. Scopes the place out. Have
well,
you
the other
checked?
day I saw someone just run by randomly, real quick, and you never know. I'm being hunted here.
Any unexplained purchases from your wife's bank account, buddy?
Not that I know of. I'm keeping track of the money pretty good.
Well, okay, it's who knows who it could be, Jamesy. There's a lot. You have no shortage of enemies, mate.
I know, no shortage.
You have to narrow it down somehow. Anyway, let's talk about, of course, the Cunha deal announced. United do a new kit launch today. Of course, there's discussions relating to other players. And we have a question segment in this particular show. So we will start opening up that segment every single week. And a few other things we might be bringing about going into next season, which if you have any ideas, any things you'd like to see us do, anything that you'd like to see us do differently, go ahead and reach out to us on our Twitter. We'll create an email or something next week, Jamesy, that for the show that people can reach out specifically so we can
Yeah,
see those
it's a good
messages.
idea. Yep.
Yeah, please give us your feedback on what you think would improve the show and what you'd like to see going into next season. Um, First of all, mate, have you had a nice few days since the last time we spoke?
Yeah, yeah. It's been all right. Weather here's getting real hot. We're getting into real summer now. So
Mm,
hoping to get outside a bit this weekend as well.
very nice, mate. I was at my son's graduation last night.
All right.
Congratulations to Aiden. Very, very proud of him. It's honestly, we've been through a lot together. So, a lot. It was quite emotional. I'm very proud of him. So congratulations to him. I love you, son. Um, Mateus Cunha. Finally, the formality being announced, and he is now, of course, a Manchester United player. When I was reading the comments, James, one of the things that was standing out to me is, the players that are coming to United now are coming for football reasons
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
they're not coming for the money because you can get paid better elsewhere. You're not coming because you're going to be in a title race or champions. You're coming for football reasons, right?
Yeah.
And Cunha genuinely sounded like someone who was ecstatic to
Yeah.
be there.
Yeah. You love to hear that. I mean that's
Mhm.
what you want, and I think it's that's what you want when you want players to have that kind of drive and the motivation when they're on the pitch to win, because it's again, it becomes for the right reasons. And I think they very much he very much believed it in saying, he wants to be a part of, essentially the bringing United back to where it should be and helping
Mhm.
United win. And I've said before that I really get this like Bruno type vibe off of
Mhm.
Cunha mentally, like you get the
Yeah,
idea. Obviously, they're
that's
different
what
players, but
I was thinking too. It was like that sounds like a
yeah,
Bruno type thing.
he just
100%.
has that a little bit. You can see it, and when you see it when he plays, there's a lot of that too. Is like he always wants to be the guy. He wants to make
Mhm.
something happen, and it's very exciting because I think obviously all the talk we've always had on the football, on the physical, on all of these things, a huge aspect that we know has been missing or that's been difficult is when you're trying to change the culture of the dressing room, why people are there,
Yeah.
why footballers are at United. And I think this is a really good step in the right direction. I've said this before too, but I do really feel like this is like on paper the most straightforward, obvious
Mm.
transfer I've seen United do in quite a long time. When you look at just all the parts of it, it's like I don't have a single question about it, really as to why it was done or if it was a good idea or the reasons for it or anything. It was just so clean, and I think that's a good one to get in the door first.
Yeah, I mean, this is a deal that I feel that United really lined up in January. They were decisive in who they wanted, and they, didn't. veer off course with that. That was their clearly Cunha was the priority, and it's been the priority since January. We saw reports about Cunha's contract and stuff back in January, and he, so United have been quite decisive in that. Jason Wilcox, sorry, excuse me, in the announcement for Cunha, Jason Wilcox was called the director of football.
Yep.
Um, he, it's reported that Cunha's on around 150 grand a week. Quite a maybe an average wage for a top team.
Yeah, it's pretty normal. I mean, you look at them, it's probably, and it's like what,
Probably on the lower
50.
end. You compare them
Yeah.
to other top players that
Yeah.
Chelsea or Holland. I mean, they're
And it seems like that's taken that approach, like United aren't winning things, so we can't give out winning things wages,
mm,
until we're winning things. We'll give out Champions League wages and winning thing wages when we're making Champions League and we're winning things. And
mhm.
I think that that's probably acceptable. I would imagine there's a lot of incentive in there for things like that. Like if United get back into the Champions League and they start to, they're there all the time, that there's going to
Yeah,
be a bump on those built into the contract if you're a player contributing to that. But that's how it should be, I think. You pay it
yeah.
when you can pay it.
Well, you should have a healthy base salary, but also everything is incentive based. I mean
Yeah.
that's exactly what they should look like. I didn't see any announcement or any hint as regards to what number he was. These are things that
Right.
don't
Yeah.
really interest me, but these are things that interest
Because
other
there were
people.
reports about the 10 before. I know we spoke about that. Yeah.
Yeah, we mentioned that about I haven't asked about that situation in a couple of weeks, so I can't say anything about it today that's of value. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Um, Gyökeres is in quite an interesting dispute with Sporting, my friend.
Mm.
So what's
Yeah.
going on
Well, the latest I think is essentially, the best I can understand it is that from his side, the feeling was between him and of course, Sporting lost their director during the season to City, Hugo Viana, who joined Manchester City, and it seems like he and his agent had some discussions with Hugo Viana last summer or before last summer. Decided to stick around another year, and had kind of one of those, they call them gentlemen's agreements, to leave for a different price. This is something that's essentially disputed by the president, Federico Varandas, the president of Sporting there, saying, maybe you had an agreement with somebody else, or maybe there was no agreement on a specific price at all. And so we're not going to sell you for this 65 million euros price or something like that in there. And that instead, we want more. Now he's still saying they're not going to sell him for, 100 million, which is his release clause, or anything like that, nor 90 million or anything like that. As far as I can gather it, I believe what they're looking for is something like Bruno got, which I don't actually particularly think is unreasonable.
on?
United paid in the end, I think, 55 million euros, but the deal rose all the way to 80. Now, Bruno's been so good. United have, in effect, paid close to 80 million euros for Bruno Fernandes. But if a player is that good, that's fine. That I actually think that was one of the better deals that we got in the last 10 years in terms of how it was structured and set up. 55 million euros for a player who's very productive up front, and then all these add-ons putting together, to
Mm,
reach that, I think is quite fair. So I think they're going to look for something like, it's very political, I think, in Portugal, and it's not that unusual, these comments to come out. I mean, political, like within the club, and
mm,
they've had a lot of turnover and difficulty, and a lot of, the stress between the fans and all of that. So I think they really want to be able to sell Gyökeres as a 80 million type sale
yeah.
for Sporting, in euros. But I do believe, of course, that one, nobody's going to be doing something like paying 100, 80 million euros upfront or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's an
Um,
insane fix.
yeah, they're not going to do that. But I do think that what will happen is, is that they're looking to get something in the range of that 55 or 60, maybe it's 60, 65 million euros up front with a lot of add-ons staged into towards that price. And I think that's fair in the end. I mean, it's a you if you because
60 million, James, and a penny over 60 million for me is a penny too high.
yeah,
And here's a couple of realities at Sporting. Sporting
yeah,
don't have they already sold Quenda and all that. They
sure,
they don't have to sell. They can they don't owe me a fair price or anyone
right,
else. But you're talking about a guy, was he 27 now?
yep. So yeah, just turned 27. Yep.
27, who's never replicated anything like this outside of Portugal. This is Portugal. Darwin Nunez was sold for close to what, 90 million,
Yeah, he was
and
sold for an extremely
based
high
on his
price.
form in
Yeah.
Portugal, and once he hit the English Premier League, he looked like he didn't belong at that level. João Felix was sold for 100 million.
125.
Yeah, and he's never been able to make the adjustment to that level.
Hmm.
There's risk involved here, because it's very difficult when you're watching players playing in Portugal, because there's strengths you can see, but the weaknesses you don't see because they're not being tested in certain ways, and you still can't really make a proper judgment on the level of the centre back they're playing against, or team. You don't really know that. Like, can they go up a level or two once they play against better opposition? To be fair, the lad was top goal scorer in the UEFA Nations League, but you're talking about a player at 27 that has not done it outside of Portugal. Now, Bruno Fernandes was 26 when United signed him.
Hmm. Pretty
So,
similar. Yeah, he was turning 26 that summer, so about a
yeah,
year difference between them.
yeah,
Not too
yeah.
much difference.
Yeah, so you can't get a Bruno, right? But
Yeah.
to me, it's, you're talking about a guy that, if they have a dispute with him by the start of the season, his price is just going to keep dropping.
Yeah. Correct. Yes.
Sporting can't just not sell him. They need him to be, you know, okay with staying and giving 100%, and okay.
Yep.
But the other part of this, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the likes of Sporting and what have you, these are football clubs that are selling clubs,
Correct. Correct.
and they've been a gateway into Europe for South American players.
Yep.
And they come with the understanding that, hey, you develop, we'll sell you. And
Yes.
that's that.
And it's not going to be too difficult either. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Sporting don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but to me, you know, you're talking about things like he had a knee injury and Sporting were deliberately leaking that so that it would put people off the transfer. This doesn't seem right to me. Like,
Yeah.
that to me seems like you're almost keeping a player prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And look, and I think that in the end they can't stick to, they have to find an acceptable middle ground that works. And I
Mhm.
do think that if a bid, I think at the end of the day, because I'm kind of knowing how these things work, realistically, if a bid comes in and it's pretty similar to the original agreement, but it's got, the old Woodward special of a Ballon d'Or clause on that, though nobody's going to know that's what it is on top, and they can sell it as a bigger sale. It probably gets done for these same reasons. They really can't afford, they can, like this year, financially afford this, but they need big sales every year. And as you said, they
Mhm.
are a selling club. And the model of sales of clubs in Portugal is to buy these players and sell them for more money. That keeps them
Mhm.
alive. That keeps them relevant. If they mess that up and they create a bad situation, it doesn't actually do much for them in the long term. Nor does it if comes into next season and he's like, I don't want to play. And it's not impossible that those things happen. Those things do happen.
Mhm.
Those things can happen. I mean, we've seen the situation. You look at this Victor Osimhen thing, which we can talk about in a little bit. What happened in Napoli, and you look at how they couldn't all
Mhm.
agree it, and now Napoli. This isn't as much as it's a complicated situation on Napoli's side, they lost because Victor Osimhen is getting paid. He's playing football, and Napoli have
Mhm.
not made any money from him, and they may never. He may end up running his contract. He may not get sold until he runs his contract down in the end. Because of the type of just the way that the whole thing was devolved around them with
Mhm.
him. Different situations for the clubs, obviously, but in terms of a player like that, these things can happen. So, look, basic data on it. United are very interested. I do think they're going to end up putting an offer in at some point. But I do think that they're not going to just say, "Oh, well, fine, it's a higher price. We'll just throw that higher price." I think
Mm.
they'll probably make an offer if they, can closer to the amount that's there at the right time, and then, um, essentially it'll have to be up to Gyökeres's agent and Sporting to sort it out at that point if they want to
I
move.
I don't think United should spend a lot of time on this. I think it's something. One of the mistakes I think United made with Barcelona on the Frankie De Jong situation is they give Barcelona too many
Yeah.
opportunities to drag that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of putting them under selection pressure and saying our deadline is July 1st. If we haven't got a deal, whatever, deal done by then, we walk away. Okay,
Yep.
and you keep to that because a lot of times you make the selling club blink
Yep.
because it's fine if you have other options and
Yep.
you've got other suitors, fine, but I don't see how not selling him works out well for Sporting, right?
Yeah.
But that's their prerogative. It's up to them. I don't think it's something United should spend a significant amount of
Agreed.
time on.
And for what it's worth, I think Sporting are revealing their hand a little bit here because they're putting some fairly obvious fake Arsenal bids out into the news space that are just not real at the moment. Arsenal have not bid for Victor Gyökeres at this point in time.
You
I
know
think
what
it
I
would
would
be
love to
well
see?
reported if that was the case. And I'm just saying I think that indicates
Yeah,
they do need to sell him and they're trying to get a leg up on this thing. But I agree with you too. Like we have a little time as of now. We're still selling players and needing to get some other things done. But you put the right offer in, and you say we need to know. This can't you don't chase this thing into July and August. That's not how it's going to work. It's something that should be.
you know what I would like to see. You needed to do that Gyökeres deal, and part of that deal for Sporting to take Holland on loan for a season.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I was
They
thinking the same
they get
thing.
a
Yeah.
striker, right?
Yep.
I think Holland would do really well in Portugal.
Hmm.
I think it's the exact environment that he needs. And I think that United would be getting back a much better player.
Yeah.
And, Sporting have a year to find a striker. And to me, I would love to see that scenario
Yeah.
happen.
I agree, and I think it would suit everybody, and then it provides value, for all sides and everything as well. And I do want to say on the Gyökeres thing, he did. I understand. I know it's not like a top league, but he did have two very good seasons in the championship before moving to
Yeah.
Portugal as well. But I do think
Yeah.
that bodes somewhat well for coming back to England because there tends to be a pretty decent carryover from players who've in the championship just because of the
Yeah.
pace of the game.
The championship has it brings out certain characteristics in you.
Hmm.
And I've said this before, like I think Mashbury, there's a noticeable difference in his
Yes.
ability to tolerate physicality and his
Yes.
ability to dish it out and how that.
Ahmad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this is a you have the fortune of being able to take that step in your development. It doesn't matter if you're an exceptional talent. I mean, United lent Paul Scholes out to Port Vale. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Beckham was out to Preston, if I remember. Um, these are key parts of a footballer's development. So that is a positive. It's just for me not something that you can demand an enormous transfer fee
Yeah.
as a
Agree.
result of,
Agree. Yep.
because there's still a lot of uncertainty about whether he can be consistent at the highest level. So and yes, we'll see what happens with Osimhen. If you look at United's budget, James, Liverpool have gone out and signed Florian Wirtz, Frimpong, what have you, and spent enormous amounts of money. City have spent an enormous amount of money again. Do we have to recalibrate our expectations here? Because the bottom line is, when you look at United's expenditure, they're just not capable of competing with that. I mean, when we're still sitting here, when Barada's talking about winning the league, what was it, 2027, you said?
28, I think. So
28. I mean,
a couple
I
of
don't,
years, right?
United financially
Mhm.
Like we've said this before, City spent what 180 million in January
Yeah.
alone, and then here, I mean, United have 73 million in cash
Mhm.
in the bank. That
Mhm.
was announced in their Q3 results.
Yep.
Jim Ratcliffe previously said that United would have went bust by Christmas. Do we need to sit here and say to ourselves, look, it's not realistic to expect United to win this league while this chasm exists?
Yeah, well, there was going to be some questions on this, and I think that it is a phased approach, right? Because one of the kind of obviously underrated aspects of this, or real aspects of this. I mean, look, there's the financial doping aspect of it that we all know has gone on with a club like City. But if we take Liverpool as maybe a better example of a club that has probably done it, unfortunately, probably the best example in England of a club that did it right to build back up to the top level and remain consistently competitive for most seasons, and have what, a Champions League and two Premier Leagues in the last 7 years, 8 years now. Um, I think it's a staged thing because there is a huge gain in the amount of money that comes in when you can be in Champions League regularly, right? From the sponsorships to the TV money, which has all gone up in the last year as well, which I think is one of the reasons you're seeing even more of like almost a new explosion of spending from these clubs, because the Champions League money is like doubled. It's gone up a lot in the recent years with these extra games, the extra everything that's gone into it. It's the gap does may get even bigger again between the clubs out of the Champions League and in the Champions League in the seasons to come, after it maybe had shrunk a bit. United's, I think that realistically, we won't have the financial strength to compete with these clubs until United are in back in the Champions League for at least a couple of seasons in a row. And that's really goal number one, is to put that together, really. And I think that, because United is so big and everything, it's they still have that natural revenue generation that gives them a leg up, the bigger stadium, the bigger everything. But realistically, I do think that that's like goal one is just get back into the Champions League, and that's not a guarantee in one season. That could be not this season. That could be the following. Could be Europa this season, Champions League the next, stay in Champions League the next, then mount a title challenge or be competitive, then see if you can win the league. And so I see it really as like, if it works out well, I mean, I would love it to be faster, but my expectations are definitely on a more of like almost like a 4 to 5 year plan in general to go through those stages of things.
Yeah, I think that if you do it incrementally, you can trust the foundations a little more. If
Yeah.
you all of a sudden have this season where you go from Leicester to almost finishing bottom to the top,
Yeah.
it's not a true reflection. Like the variance can't be that big.
Yeah.
Even But as I said, my friend before, the gap between 16th and sixth, I don't think is massive, and I think
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
ways that's
Who said
encouraging.
that? Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I agree, because I do think that
algorithm.
you can get back into Europe pretty easily. I don't think it's that hard to get back into Europe for a team like United with the spending power, because they're even this summer they're going to outspend all the teams from 6th to 17th, but they're not going to outspend the guys in 1 to 3. And so I think getting back to that position is easy. I think that part is where it's really going to be like, you got to be really damn good when you're getting back. That's where we've always messed it up, right? They'd get back into Champions League one season and then they blow it up again and do it all wrong. And that's where the true test of I think that's going to be the harder part of this whole thing, because I think you can almost like brute force it up to get back into Europe. I think you can almost brute force it on that by, you just like we're doing now, which isn't a bad strategy. It doesn't mean it's the wrong strategy.
Hmm.
Buying guys like Cunha, buying guys like Mbumo, proven Premier League players, you get back into Europe pretty easily like that. But the
Hmm.
step beyond that is harder for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at the players Newcastle have been buying, James. They're not Galacticos. They're
Yep.
players that are going to give them the foundations, flatten
Yep.
their curve between their performance variance, and make sure that they have a consistent core that gets them in contention at the very least, or into the Champions League. So,
Yep.
I want to ask about City spending. Does that indicate that they anticipate a positive outcome of, because we're supposed to, allegedly being told a decision is imminent, then of course whoever loses in that will appeal. That appeal process will take a significant amount of time. So it's going to be, in my opinion, at least 2026 before we have a
Mm.
final verdict, adjudicated verdict on this. Um, do you feel that City are acting with the confidence that they are going to escape any type of reprimand here?
Kind of feel like that is the case personally. Yeah. I mean, I feel like when you watch them operate, it's not like the operations of a club that has any fear of like anything. And unfortunately, I've never really felt like they were going to end up, you know, in trouble for a lot of this stuff. I mean, maybe they'll get slapped with some financial penalties, but the problem is it's like a speeding ticket for somebody who's extremely wealthy. Like it's just the cost of doing business type of thing. Or yeah, I guess a better example is you get a lot of businesses, big businesses that are willing to break rules and pay fines because they can and because it was worth it. And I feel that that's kind of the where City are at. They probably will get some financial penalty, but I don't think they're going to get any sort of major sporting penalty. And I think that's probably what they're betting on is and I think they probably feel good that they're not gonna get a major sporting penalty, let's put it that way.
Here's the thing, James. 116 charges. The probability that every one of them is bogus is zero,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
they're guilty of obviously rule
Something.
breaches,
Yeah.
and we can have a discussion about the the whether that's regulatory capture, whether these rules that were created are fair or whatever. It doesn't matter. But City have gained a major competitive advantage by doing that. And when you've already applied punitive measures to clubs like Forest and Everton, points deductions for a single breach of the rules, it's going to be a really hard sell for the Premier League, its integrity, um, and also to not prevent future lawsuits from other football clubs
Yeah.
saying that how on earth can you justify giving Forest and Everton points deductions and giving City, a cost of doing business fine? Like
Yeah.
this is, that to me is not, isn't it, that to me is pathetic. Like one, where's the money go? Right.
Yep.
Two, this is pointless to me. Like their credit. We know football's corrupt. Football's
Mm.
always been corrupt. I mean, Pablo Escobar owned football teams. You've had people like Thaksin Shinawatra, who is, a war criminal and, human rights abuses. And, football has been awash with corruption. And football clubs weren't sufficiently concerned about FFP until people like Chelsea and City and Nancy McCatchlin and all that came about. And all of a sudden, there was a major moral imperative to regulate clubs financially, but just not that, of course. But nonetheless, this if City end up getting just a fine, James, and there is no sporting consequences, the blowback from that will be big.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and alternatively, they might, expect that. I don't know. You get this weird thing. Kind of the reason why I felt like it's not going to be major is I feel like it's taken so long and it's been such a long time and City have become such a you get to that point where you feel like the powers that be don't actually want to make a big
Oh, of
punishment.
course, James. They didn't want this Cycling Federation
Yeah,
didn't want to go after Lance Armstrong
because it
because
makes
he's their
their
yeah,
sport
it's their money
bad,
leader.
right? The integrity of the whole sport fades, and that's my biggest thing is that I think they won't because it's like it's one thing when you're slapping teams that aren't winning anything with 10, 12 points deductions, but when you start stripping titles, I think the integrity of the sport goes away so much. Like, I mean, I'm not a cycling person, obviously, but in the slightest, but I do know for a fact that I never hear about cycling anymore in the US to the level that it was after Lance Armstrong got all that stuff stripped away because it was like, what's the point now? Guy won all these things and they're all stripped because of this and doping and that, and everybody's doping and cycling. So what's the point of why? Like you just don't hear about it, and I
Mhm.
know it has an effect on these types of things. in that way. And I think that that's the main thing, is it would be so catastrophic to the integrity of the Premier League to punish them in a way that they should be punished, that they won't do it.
James, one of the reasons why they are extremely lax on things like cocaine testing is
Yeah.
because they don't want to
Yeah.
know about it because
Yes.
it's rife. And so the commercial impact, like, can you imagine if Ronaldo at 21, 22 had have been, you know, tested positive for coke or something? You think that wouldn't have been hidden?
Yeah.
The commercial consequences of that,
Yeah.
it's in no one's interests. So you see this in boxing all the time. You
Mm.
know, people popping positive for a banned substance and then not
Yeah.
finding out to 3 months later, and they knew before the fight.
Yeah.
So this is something that happens a lot, and yeah, it's definitely not an accident. But I'm just curious to see what decision ends up happening here. And the
Yeah.
thing is, James, like if City escape, sporting punitive measures, the blowback from that from other clubs, the Premier League have to be conscious of lawsuits, not just domestically but abroad. I mean, the LFP, this Spanish league, have threatened legal action against this, and for UEFA, they might be faced with a decision. Should City,
Yeah.
with all due respect, are not a super club. For the Champions League, they would survive reputational damage, whatever, if City weren't in it for 2 years.
Right.
And I don't think it would have a devastating commercial impact. It would set precedent going forward that needs to be set. It would show that the law isn't applied on an ad hoc basis, that
Yeah.
it's unconditionally applied, and that this is another thing where they have to be embarrassed about how long this is taking. Like, there has
Hmm.
to be an expedited process, because what it says to other clubs is, look, if you're going to break rules, go big.
Yeah.
Break
Right. Do it really
150.
big,
Yeah,
win everything, and then it's
well,
okay.
yeah, because we're all going to be fucking dead by the time we get his verdict here, right? I mean, we're all
Yeah.
being a fucking gulag. But I mean, but if there has to listen. They sent. There was a quicker verdict than O.J. Simpson, for fuck's sake. Like, this is
Yeah.
stupid, man.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not that complex. I'm sorry.
No,
And
and the only reason it's being delayed is because they don't want to do it. To be quite honest, like
of course,
that to me, that is the only reason.
but think about all the benefits that you get as a result of being. Look, James, Inter Milan were, financially doped by Pirelli.
Yeah.
Fiat, they financially doped Juventus. Berlusconi did financially doped AC Milan. Bernatoppi with this has been going on football forever, and football wasn't sufficiently concerned about this until a couple of uppity upstarts started trying to get into the room of the
Yeah.
the ruling cabal. But they have to have sporting consequences for this, James. I mean,
Yeah.
anything else is unacceptable. But with that in mind, James, like we saying about what's the realistic expectation for Amarim, what would be a definition of success next season?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, and there was actually a question that was that that
Is that
I'll
part of the
skip
questions
because
we could ask?
no,
Wasn't
no, that was
it?
one I had, and now I've lost it anyway. So I'll just answer it anyway because I know this was a question some people had: is what would be a realistic expectation? And I think you were talking like this season, right? And obviously, we still have to see what's delivered. Because my
Mhm.
mind, it comes down to,
Yeah, that's fair.
do we get a striker in or not? Because I obviously I think Cunha and Bumo, presuming Mbumo is likely to happen, which it is likely to happen still. Um, those help. They help.
Hmm.
But if you go into the season with Hoyland and Xerxes as your main strikers, you're sacrificing something in the way that you want to play. I think Xerxes would probably be more likely to start.
You
But
think that's a
if you,
possibility?
I think it's extremely unlikely. I think it's extremely unlikely, and I'm not sure,
James,
what to
I
say.
don't know how, if you're any of us, you can evaluate. Look at the end of the
They
season. and
Yeah.
not center striker. Like that.
Well,
That
and it
is
was the number one
criminal.
priority all season, right? It was. Now, one could say, well, you can play Mbumo there, and he's done it before, but I think that that's again, that's more like
Yeah. So we're
that's
back
poor.
to
It's like we're back. You're moving
putting
a
square
guy
pegs in
out
round
of
holes.
exactly. Like you're
Left back,
compromising hard to do
right
that. Yeah,
footers at left back.
yeah.
Top
Dallo
clubs don't
can
do this,
play at
James.
left back. That doesn't mean you do
Yeah,
it.
top clubs don't do this, James.
Yeah. So no,
Yeah.
that's a huge factor. I think Xerxes gives you an option that's decent, but it requires you to play different than you want to play. So it's another compromise in that respect. Even though I really do like Joshua Xerxes as a
Okay, let me
a
ask you
player.
this, okay,
Yeah.
because I was thinking about him the other day and I was like, okay, he had this rough start to his career at United, and he had some really poor performances. Gets booed and comes back, has some decent performances that were better than the ones that he was putting in before. But has he ever really reached a level that convinces you that he's good enough for Manchester United, or are we giving him too much credit for the performances that he was putting in after he was booed because the performances before that were so poor, or do we see a footballer in there that says this is a Manchester United player? I want to believe the latter, but
Yeah.
are we giving him too much credit for this little renaissance of form?
No, I don't think he's necessarily getting too much credit because I think what's gone on is that, during that period of time, he started actually playing quite well, and he was having a really good run in the Europa League as well. He scored a couple goals and like really doing the business and starting to show. But I think the other thing that makes people really like Xerxes is you can tell when you watch him that he has serious talent. Like you can't
Of
always
course, yeah.
players, but you watch him and you're like, holy shit! Like so, you're more likely to be like, that's a guy that you think if you could keep him rolling, keep him confident, that can become something because you don't see players like that very often. Like he is very unique. He's not Paul Pogba, but the reason I bring Pogba into the discussion on it is like that size with that ability on the ball, the things he can do. It's very rare. You don't see a lot of
Mhm.
guys like that. And I'm not saying he's that good or he's going to reach that level or anything, but you almost look at it like that's a player when you watch him, you say, it'd be a shame if they don't reach their potential.
Mhm.
So you want them to reach their potential because you know that there's something special there. So in a sense, I think he's like it's more hope than it is like specifically rating him. That being said, I think of the dynamic of like Sadio Mane,
Mhm.
Firmino, and Salah. When I look at Cunha, Xerxes, and Mbumo, and I think there is a potential blueprint for something that has worked successfully if those players can mesh, but it's still a departure from what you wanted. I think Xerxes would be best if you don't put that pressure on him
Well,
all season to be that
the part that I don't understand about Xerxes, mate, because United needed to send a striker last summer,
guy.
right?
Yeah.
And they sent him. And a few months later, we're told by Amarim Xerxes not a striker. Xerxes
Yes.
like a 9.5 or whatever. How do you go from needing a striker who scores goals, who when you're selecting the target would have been done in conjunction with the football, the entire football department, and then just a few months later have that player um, basically have completely reappraised as someone that's not a striker that
Mm.
you thought you signed a striker 4 or 5 months ago, but actually he's not. Like that's I don't know what to think about that.
Yeah. I know, and it was a strange one. I don't totally understand. I still feel like there was, the end of last season. Remember, Hoyland got benched and Bruno was playing the false nine, and that's where we went into the cup.
Mhm.
And I think that led to this signing. Essentially, was
Mhm.
like maybe we make a shift in strategy, and in that sense, it made sense. But at the same time, that's part of the short term planning because that was like a 5 game, like that was like a 5 game stretch. It wasn't exactly like long term thinking. Like, yeah, we're gonna be a false nine football club. Like, you
Mhm.
have to make a decision to be a false nine football club because it changes the way all your dynamics work in terms of like you can't just flip in and out of a false nine, a striker. Like it's a very different way of playing football.
I
It's
think
one
you
of
need a
the
striker, James. I think you
yeah,
need
me too.
someone that
I agree with you.
false
I
nine.
agree with you.
I just think Arsenal.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just think
I
it's
know, and they
a
can't
weakness
score,
in
you
the
know.
middle. Yeah, and
And look,
I think
go
certainly
ahead,
in
go ahead.
Acuna in behind the nine
Yeah, yeah,
would be
exactly.
something I would like to see.
Yeah,
And look, ironically, that is probably a position Jadon Sancho could have played. Like
yeah,
when Sancho had fleeting moments of form at United or goal scoring, these goals were coming from the middle primarily.
yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have the pace to play out wide. There's a technique to play in behind the nine. And I remember United trying this out pre-season with him, even with Mason Mount in there. But there's absolutely no way Jadon Sancho should, can be allowed to come back to
Right.
United. And it's really quite sad to me that this young lad is prioritizing, from assuming we're reading the reports correctly, that,
Mm.
salary is more important than anything else. Exceptionally talented lad. But for whatever reason, just didn't have that. I don't know. It didn't have the right people around him, because there was
Mhm.
things that he was doing to me that were quite clearly obvious and not in his interest.
Sorry,
So
the
yeah,
original question was where
yeah.
could
So
you
I'm
add
not
Daniels?
rambling now. Oh, just talking
I
about
just
like the number
remembered this.
nine.
Yeah. To me, it's that. Like, I think there's other things that we need, right? But no number 9, I think we won't get above 8th. I just don't see it. I think 7th, 8th is around where
Mm,
United can get, because I think the league's competitive, and I think we'll have a lot of those games where we just miss that number 9
mm.
punching it into the net. Um, with the striker, I think, presuming it's like someone like Gyökeres, then I think you can get 5th. I think you could push to that last Champions League spot. I think you could this
Yeah, I
season.
did
If
too. I think
yeah,
if I could pick one, like you said on
yeah.
Monday, I would pick Osman, but we will see.
On that, by the
Um,
way, just while we were saying this, just we get a little bit of you get a little bit of drama on a daily basis that goes on in the window. So because we were talking about this dispute with Gyökeres and Sporting, and he put on his Instagram at the moment in a story, there's a lot of talk at the moment. Most of it is false. I will speak when the time is right. So,
mm.
we get a little bit of a little bit of the drama that goes with all of this to go alongside
Yeah,
things.
it's fucking United always get caught up in transfers like this. I swear to God. Um, I was just quick segue. I was thinking about Florian Wirtz, and I was going to myself, do you know something? Liverpool have never really had a global icon footballer.
Mm,
So I was searching who's their best ever player, and there's one or two, Douglas, what have you, maybe Salah is in that. But you need look at United outside their stadium. Best, Law, Charlton. These are football
yeah,
icons that are recognized all over the world. And I'm looking at Liverpool going, this massive football club's never had a football icon that, has won Ballon d'Ors or has won. I mean, I know they have Michael Owen that's won a Ballon d'Or, but I'm talking about that are football, royalty. And, you know, it's interesting, will Florian Wirtz be that guy? I don't know. That's a lot of money. But
mm,
yeah, it's a football club that's bit strange in that sense that it's never really had an outstanding player. And well, Wirtz, man, I just get a bit of Havertz vibes.
mm.
Maybe I'm totally
I got
wrong.
I have my concerns on it. I mean, I have concerns every single time a player is signed from the German league in particular.
Especially
And
now again.
yeah, and Jadon Sancho was people can't play it down. Jadon Sancho at Dortmund was probably the best young footballer in the world at that time. The numbers he was putting up, he was
I don't
doing
know if he's the best in the
40
world, but
goals.
he was one of them.
Comparably for his
Maybe
age,
in the
what I
top
mean
10.
is yeah, what I mean is by his age, you know what I
Sure.
mean? Because I think he was doing like 40 goals and assists at 19, 20 years old, and it was in the Champions League too. He was producing in the Champions League, in Bundesliga, and he did it season after season after
Yeah.
season. I remember there were some
I
numbers
was
like only
ecstatic when United
Messi was
signed him.
comparable, and I was like, "Holy crap." Like you thought this was the guy.
Mm. I did. I was
And
ecstatic when United signed him. I really wanted him.
yeah, me too. It was like I thought he was going to be an absolute world beater.
It,
And maybe there's other reasons, but we've seen it Mkhitaryan, we've seen this where we've brought in these players from the German league and The pace of the game is different. The spaces are different. Those high lines,
Indeed,
that
Kagawa.
it's just very, very different. And like with Havertz as well. And it's the
Same
same
when
reason
United signed Kagawa.
yeah, and it's the same reason I really wasn't keen and hoping they wouldn't pursue Benjamin Šeško, because I had so many doubts when you look at how Leipzig play. It's so like it's just I
Well, you look at is it Bino Kittens, if I'm saying that
yeah
right, or,
yeah German yeah
goes to Dortmund, and English teams are willing to pay 50 million for him when he couldn't get a sniff while he was in England. And one thing that sticks in my mind, James, I remember going over to United Burnley match when Ranić was the
mm,
manager, and they were talking after the game because Burnley was down there in the relegation zone. I remember Ranić saying, "Yeah, I know that they're fighting relegation, but they would never be that in Germany." And I'm looking at that going, never more than the present moment has there been, to me, Bayern Munich are as good as any team in the Premier League, but the rest of
yep
that league,
yes
you know, it's really even it's really hard to say that that's the best that Bundesliga has ever been,
mm,
and I just don't trust players. It's a bit like the Portuguese situation. Like you'd need such specific attributes to survive in the Premier
mm,
League, and a lot of times, if you fail, it has nothing to do with your ability or technique. It has to do with your physicality. It has to do with
yeah
things that don't get tested in other leagues.
yeah.
But Wirtz is an exceptional player. I'm maybe just being a bitch.
No, I mean, look, the thing is 150 million is a lot, and the fact of the matter is that money he has to do exceptionally well to justify it, no matter what. The pressure's on your back, and the biggest things I would say, not take off the dislike of Liverpool, hat for a minute, is say that um, the biggest objective concerns I have is he tore his ACL a few years ago. He's a young player with a pretty slight frame, and he's coming to a really physical league, and you're paying a lot of money for that. I have concerns with that. No matter what, if we were signing him, I'd have the exact same concerns. No matter how talented he is, I'd be like, I guess we'll see. So it's a
Yeah, I
big
mean
one. That's a big
everything's a
one.
risk. We've come a
Yeah.
long way from Klopp being completely morally outraged over Paul Pogba's fee,
Right.
to
Yeah. I want. You know what? I do want to hear Graham Souness week in and week out asking where the goals are from Wirtz. He's got to be on his back from day one, doesn't he?
yeah, I don't
That
know.
he should be for the amount of money.
I mean, can you imagine if he was saying for United?
I
You
know.
know,
I know.
imagine the stats would be unveiling. Apparently, this is how many Florian Wirtz scored in his previous life. This is how many steps he took before he was 10 months old. Like, and he'd be making 11 billion a week. One other positive, young 16-year-old signed Harley Emerson James from Southampton, £1 million, young left-footed centre back. Obviously, Wilcox will know this kid very, very well, being a part of the Southampton setup. They've also got a 20% sell-on fee. What I like about stuff like this, James, is United have needed a left-footed centre back forever.
Yes.
And there has to be opportunities for players to, evolve into the first team. They should have been addressing the fact that they don't have a left-footed centre back, not just in relation to the first team, but in the youth team,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
there's natural progression, and
Yep.
so that if someone gets injured, you can go and get it in heaven. You can go
Yep.
get these young, so that that's also a solution you're fixing internally. Left-footed centre backs are not easy to find.
Correct. Yeah.
Encouraging that one thing I will definitely credit Ineos for, that is an obvious difference between Ineos and what was going on before, is they have been very, very proactive about signing young
Yep.
talents for the youth, which is something we've wanted to see forever. I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
this in any way, where provokes concern about, United not going to spend in the market. Like, this is
No.
something that's completely separate,
These
and
things
this
have to
is
happen for the
responsible.
long term. They're
Yeah.
not now signings. They're long-term thinking,
Mhm.
and that long-term thinking hasn't existed at United in a long
Correct.
time. And so that is a big positive for sure. I agree.
And you look at how well United are playing at that level. I mean, they've done an exceptional job. New kit launch with Adidas, £125 retailing for. Of course, they get 10 million less in that deal. What do you quick opinion on the shirt, and then we'll get to a few questions. What
It
do
always
you
looks a
think?
lot nicer with the player wearing it, you know, like, when I saw pictures beforehand, I was like, "Eh, looks pretty good on the players wewearing it, I think."
I'd like to know when I see
I quite
Salma Hayek. When I see Salma Hayek wearing it, I'd like to know.
Yeah, that would be good.
Oh
No,
mate,
I like it. I tend to I haven't bought a lot of kits in the last 10 years. I tend to, on occasion, buy the away one because it's usually a bit more unique, in that respect, but,
oh, I'm sitting thinking about Salma Hayek.
just
She
wait to
be
see who's
getting
got it.
banged like Stevie Wonder's tour for coffee table. I'm oh sorry, I was edit that out. Jesus, great.
No,
Sorry,
no, but no, it's all right. We United, yeah,
I
I
love. Sorry, mate.
yeah.
She is beautiful. Oh mate, just that's my type.
Yeah.
The dark hair, that I like that sort of Latino look. She's beautiful, gorgeous. Sorry, man. Anyway, what we're saying there? Should we get to some
Something about a
questions here?
jersey, you know? Yeah, let's get to some questions. Here's a question for both of us, probably. This comes from J JP Robles 7. Would you rather sign a top striker or a top midfielder and play Xerxes? I think we've both about covered our stance on that, which is 100% the top striker, right?
Hundred percent.
I'm not even it's not even a question
Striker.
for me. My view on it is you can improve the midfield to win a title. But the forwards are why we were 15th, not in the top 5, 6. And after that you get to the other things. So yeah.
If you give me 100 million and said sign 3 players that will instantly improve United, it would be 2 forwards and a goalkeeper. Those to me are the first 3 priorities because those to me were the biggest
Yep.
reason why United had the season they had
Yeah.
last season.
Yep.
Um, we could get away with losing a midfielder or not having a midfielder, but to me, the goalkeeper position and the striker's position, United, I think will find an agreement for Mbeumo, and
Yeah.
I think get another striker, get a couple out the door, get hopefully get a goalkeeper. Now that Leverkusen have the Verts and Frimpong money, maybe they want to sign our goalkeeper. That would be nice.
Onana, Anthony,
I
or
don't want to.
Garnacho could all come up
Nah,
for
I don't want to be
Leverkusen now.
I don't want to be nasty about him. To be honest, no.
Yeah.
I wish he had been successful, but whatever. Okay,
Yep.
mate. Any other questions we have? Let's
Yeah,
get
this one
to.
from PJ. Do you think Mourinho would have won a Premier League with United if he joined immediately after Sir Alex instead of Moyes?
No, because I just think that once Ferguson left, United completely changed their definition of success to
Yeah.
a business. That was found on a balance sheet, and United really weren't interested in winning the league at that point. They were just interested in qualifying for revenue streams.
Yeah, I think he was the right guy at that time, but the club was wrong, so it didn't
I
matter.
think he
And
was a bit too
regardless,
late. I think they should have got him
yeah,
a few years
yeah,
earlier, but they were never going to support him in a way that
yeah,
was second. The Glazers were delighted with.
yep. There's a bunch of questions on this, so I don't want to do it by name. Do you think we still have a chance at Osimhen? We'd spoken about this earlier, and it was pretty solid that everybody figured he's going to Saudi. Now that he's turned down Saudi, and it
Mm.
seems like that's not on the table, what happens? Is this something that could come back
Yeah,
into the
it's,
mind of
it's
clubs?
it's a really good question, James, because you turn down Saudi if you've got other concrete offers, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and you only turn down Saudi to stay in Europe because you're pursuing trophies or you want to play at the highest level. You go to Saudi for the money. It might one day become a competitive league where
Yeah.
and you have to do this when you're starting the league in the beginning.
Yes.
There's no
Got
criticism
to
of the
attract
Saudis
them. Yeah.
there. Yeah, of course. They're doing exactly what they need to do to build that league, and they're not just saying 35-year-old has-beens. But Osman clearly wants to stay in Europe. And look, one thing about African footballers, James, that you cannot underestimate is how big Manchester United are in that continent.
Yeah.
Like you listen to the way a Gallo would talk about
Yep.
United with such deference, such respect and love, and a lot of African players, United are a massive football club, and a lot. I think Osimhen grew up a United fan. I think I've seen pictures of him in a United shirt.
United or Chelsea, which are both pretty big in.
Well,
this
Jim
area. It's
Ratcliffe,
been
the same.
debated a little bit, you know. So he
Jimmy
and Jim
Ratcliffe,
can get along. Yeah, they're
yeah,
United and Chelsea
yeah.
fans for life, depending
But
on when
don't
you
do what
ask.
John B.
Okay.
McHale did, young man. You know,
Yes.
no, I would love if I could walk out pick one striker right now.
Yeah.
That's my guy.
Same. Hundred
I would.
percent.
I
Yeah.
don't typically get excited about signings, James, but that is one. That would certainly, as Van Hal would say, make me look forward to horny football.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Last question here comes from Ato Tamwar. We kind of spoke about this a little bit, but a little more thoughts on the Sancho situation.
Mm,
Um, Finding a buyer might prove difficult. It seems like now there's
mhm.
some reports of some clubs that want him on loan. Maybe that's what ends up happening. If he was here, would he? Do you think he would be with the first team, or do you think he would be with the youth? I don't think he'd be sent back to the youth for what it's worth. I don't think that'll ever happen again. But what do you think would
Look,
happen, and what should happen here?
football fans forgive quickly. If
Hmm.
somehow Jadon Sancho found his way in the United team on the first day of the season and fans were upset at that, he scored a couple of goals, be forgotten about, right?
Hmm.
That's just the way the nature of the game. Sancho has done a lot of stupid shit that has contaminated his image in a way that is, to me, detrimental to him and didn't need to happen.
Yep.
Uh, if he has a choice between playing for Manchester United or playing for some nondescript team, United are obviously the better choice. But with Sancho, he's made that difficult.
Yeah.
To me, there would have to be, he would have to have a relationship with Ruben Amorim. He would have
Yep.
to apologize to the club, but he would
Yep.
also have to apologize profusely to the fans in a way that if you do that, James, in life, most people are forgiven. If
Yeah.
you turn around and say, "Mea culpa, I'm sorry, I was wrong," you didn't commit a war crime, you done stupid shit. Okay, we'll get over it. We can move on. Okay, well, but people are obviously going to feel differently. It depends on how they feel independently. But
Yeah.
United are if they don't sell them. It's the same situation with Rashford and Anthony. If they don't sell them, they have to come back into the first team because they're assets, and you
Yep.
can't just shelve them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, and I think that everybody would have to take somewhat of a mature view on that for that to happen. But at the end of the day, every footballer's priority is usually playing football, and hopefully, hopefully that's how it goes. I mean, look, he went on loan while Eric Ten Hag was still here, which is where the original major incident began. So,
Yeah,
you
but
never
you have
know.
to judge him on what happened to Chelsea. Chelsea,
Oh, no,
first
no,
of
no,
all,
for sure. I don't disagree. I was more speaking as to like
sure, but
maybe the conflict isn't as big behind the scenes,
do you know
regardless of
what
everything else.
the thing is that the troubles in Sancho's life and the troubles that he's contending with, there were such obvious wrong decisions at the time.
Mm, yeah,
Like, don't go public on the Ten Hag thing, right?
yeah.
Because then you put there's only one outcome
You're
of
the
that,
enemy. Yeah, yeah,
and it's in September. Like if I'm
yeah.
his agent or his representative, I would do not
Hmm.
do not put yourself in a position where you're not playing football between now and January. Bite your
Yeah,
lip, and just get on with it, and then we'll race it. Chelsea have come in. Wait a minute. Chelsea have 300 players, right?
yeah,
I need to be playing football,
yeah,
right? This is not a football club. If you want to you want to move to London, fine. But this is not the club where I would have went to. And the whole freedom. I mean, all of
yeah,
this is
yeah,
so easily avoid. If he'd have said to me, "If you're representing Sancho, I'm going to post. Do not do that. There's
yeah,
no upside to you." And then not being bought by Chelsea, which were the club that was supposed to be your dream club, that was supposed to be the club that was going to rescue from all the things that are causing you to not play well, and for that club to pay 5 million to send you back. I'm sorry, but that is if I'm Sancho, out of embarrassment, I'm agreeing that contract. And
yep,
that's why apparently they put these, clauses in where you have to pay
yeah,
5 million is if they don't agree on a contract,
yep.
then this can happen. But every part of this just looks bad for him.
For sure, for sure. All right, that's what I've got. Those are the main ones that I think we
All right,
haven't. I think
Matty.
we've touched on everything else.
Yeah, going forward, folks, we'll get more of them in. James just doesn't stop talking about shit. So,
I know. What the hell, man?
all right, Matty. Listen, thanks to all of you folks. Have a happy Father's Day before we see you all. And thanks for all your questions. Don't forget, let us know what changes you'd like to see us make. Thanks, James. All the best, Matty.
See you later, buddy.
Love, brother. See ya. Bye, guys.